Before you move in with your adult children, watch this. At 69, Barbara Ellison sold her house in 11 days. No inspection contingencies, no second thoughts, no lawyer reviewing the fine print, just a signature, a moving truck, and a promise that she was finally going to be close to the people she loved most. 8 months later, she stood in a room she had helped pay for, listening to her son and his wife discuss turning it into a playroom, and she realized she no longer had the right to say no. This is her story. Barbara had built a quiet, full life in the 15 years since her divorce. She bought a small 3-bedroom house in a Sacramento suburb with money she had scraped together herself. Back when the idea of owning something entirely in her own name still felt like a small miracle. She taught elementary school for almost 3 decades, the kind of teacher who remembered every student's birthday and kept a drawer full of stickers just to see a child's face light up. When she retired at 66, she filled her days with the things she'd never had time for. A book club that met every other Thursday. Long morning walks with 2 neighbors who became close friends. Watercolor classes at the community center, where she discovered, to her own surprise, a genuine talent for painting light on water. She was, by every reasonable measure, independent. Not lonely in the way people assume older women living alone must be lonely. Content, busy, her own woman, on her own schedule, in a house that owed nothing to anyone. But there was one ache underneath all of it, quiet and persistent, the kind of ache many parents carry without ever saying it out loud. She missed her grandchildren. Her son Daniel, 41, lived across town with his wife Jessica and their 2 children, ages 6 and 9. She saw them on holidays, the occasional Sunday, birthdays marked carefully on her calendar. It was never enough. She would drive home after those visits with a familiar tightness in her chest, wondering how many more years she had left to actually know these children rather than simply visit them. So when Daniel called one evening with an idea, Barbara's heart moved before her mind had a chance to catch up. "Mom, Jessica and I have been talking," he said. "We're planning to build an in-law suite in the backyard, a real one, full kitchen, its own bathroom, plenty of space. We want you to move in. Be close to us, be close to the kids." Barbara sat very still on her couch, phone pressed to her ear, feeling something warm and hopeful bloom in her chest for the first time in years. Not a burden, not a problem to be managed, an invitation, a wish to have her nearby, spoken plainly by her own son. "We'd help you sell the house," Daniel continued. "You wouldn't have a mortgage anymore, no more roof repairs, no more mowing the lawn by yourself. And honestly, Mom, the money from your house would help us finish the build faster. We could get you moved in by fall." It made sense to her in every direction she looked. Financial sense, emotional sense. The story of a woman who had spent a decade and a half being strong and self-sufficient, finally allowed to lean just a little on the family she loved. There was no crisis behind this decision, no fall, no diagnosis, no frightening night alone. That, in some ways, made it easier to say yes without asking the harder questions, because there was no fear pushing her forward, only hope. And hope, it turns out, can make a person just as quick to sign something they shouldn't. Barbara listed her house within 2 weeks. It sold almost immediately, well above asking price, in a market hungry for exactly the kind of tidy, well-kept home she'd spent years maintaining, She didn't hire her own attorney to review the sale. Daniel's college friend, a real estate agent, handled everything, and it all moved so smoothly that pausing to double-check anything felt almost insulting, like she didn't trust her own son. When the check came through, Barbara transferred a significant portion of it directly to Daniel and Jessica to help finish the in-law suite faster. It felt, in that moment, like the most natural thing in the world. She was investing in her family. She was investing in her own future, too. A beautiful new space to live in, close to the people she loved. Nobody suggested putting her name on anything, and she didn't think to ask. The construction took 4 months. Barbara stayed in an extended stay hotel nearby, visiting the building site every week, watching the frame go up, choosing paint colors for what she was told would be her kitchen, her bathroom, her sunroom, where she planned to keep her easel by the window for the best afternoon light. She sent photos to her friend Patricia almost daily. Patricia, 71, had been Barbara's colleague for 20 years before they both retired, and she still lived alone in the same house she'd owned for 3 decades, fiercely happy in her independence, the kind of woman who traveled solo twice a year and never once described herself as lonely. "Just make sure you get something in writing, Barb," Patricia said once gently over the phone. Even with family, especially with family, Barbara laughed it off. "It's Daniel, Pat. He's my son." She meant it kindly. She meant it the way most people mean it, right up until the moment they don't. The day Barbara moved into the finished suite was, by her own account, one of the happiest of her life. The space was beautiful, bright, modern, with a small kitchen island she'd specifically requested, and a bathroom with the walk-in shower she'd always wanted in her old house, but never got around to installing. Daniel and Jessica threw a small dinner to welcome her. The grandchildren ran through the new rooms squealing with delight, and for one evening, everything felt exactly as it was supposed to. It took less than a week for Barbara to notice something about the layout she hadn't fully registered during construction. Her suite had no door to the street, no independent driveway, no separate walkway to the sidewalk. To come and go, she had to walk through Daniel and Jessica's backyard, past their patio furniture, sometimes directly through their kitchen if the side gate was locked, which it often was. Her home, in every practical sense, was accessible only through theirs. She mentioned it once, lightly, to Jessica. "I was thinking it might be nice to have my own gate installed. Maybe a path around the side." Jessica smiled the particular smile of someone already moving on to the next item on a list. "We can look into that eventually, Barbara. It's not really in the budget right now, with everything we just spent on the build." The conversation ended there, and somehow it never came up again. Small things followed, the way they usually do. Quiet, reasonable sounding, easy to dismiss on their own. Jessica began asking Barbara to watch the children after school 2, then 3, then 4 afternoons a week. It started as a casual request. "Could you grab the kids from the bus stop today? I've got a dentist appointment." And slowly hardened into an unspoken expectation, never formally discussed, never actually agreed to, simply assumed. Barbara's watercolor class met on Tuesday afternoons, the exact window Jessica most often needed coverage. She missed the first class apologetically, then the second. By the 6th missed class, she quietly let the registration lapse. telling herself she'd sign up again next semester once things settled down. Her book club met on alternating Thursdays in the evening, which should have been safe, but dinner at the main house had become something of a nightly ritual, one Barbara felt she couldn't easily skip without seeming distant, without seeming ungrateful for a family that had built her a beautiful place to live. She missed 3 consecutive meetings. Her friends stopped calling to remind her about the 4th. She noticed, too, that decisions about her own space were being made without her. Daniel mentioned, almost in passing one Sunday, that they were thinking of adding solar panels that would run a line across the roof of her suite. Jessica had already picked out new landscaping for the shared yard, including removing a small lemon tree Barbara had planted near her front step the week she moved in because it didn't match the design plan. Nobody asked her opinion on either. Nobody seemed to think they needed to. One afternoon, needing a document from her old files, Barbara went looking for the paperwork related to her move, the contribution she'd made toward construction, any agreement about her right to live in the space. She searched through her own drawers, then hesitantly asked Daniel directly, "Do we have anything written down about the suite and the money I put toward it?" Daniel looked at her, mildly confused. "It's your home, Mom. Why would we need paperwork? I just want to understand what I actually own here, or don't." "You don't need to own it, Mom. It's family. You live here, and that's what matters." It was said warmly. It was said, she believed, with real love behind it. But it left her with an answer to a question she hadn't quite meant to ask, and a truth she couldn't unlearn. Legally, on paper, in the eyes of anyone outside this family, Barbara owned nothing of the home she now lived in. The suite existed entirely on Daniel and Jessica's property, under Daniel and Jessica's names, financed in part by money that had once been Barbara's, and now simply wasn't anymore, in any way she could point to and prove. Months passed. The rhythm of Barbara's days became almost entirely organized around her son's household rather than her own. She picked the children up from school most weekdays. She often made dinner for all 4 of them, since Jessica worked later hours during the school year and appreciated not having to cook. She rarely left the property except for grocery runs and the occasional doctor's appointment. When she did want to go somewhere, visit Patricia for a weekend, attend a former colleague's retirement party across town, she found herself checking with Jessica first, almost involuntarily, the way one checks a shared calendar before booking anything. One Saturday, Barbara mentioned she was thinking of driving up to see Patricia, staying overnight, maybe even through Sunday. Jessica's face changed immediately. "Saturday? Barbara, we talked about this. Daniel and I have that anniversary dinner Saturday night. We need you for the kids." Barbara tried to recall the conversation Jessica was referencing and came up empty. "I don't remember agreeing to that specifically." "Well, it's kind of assumed, isn't it? I mean, you're right here. It's not exactly a big ask." Barbara went. That time. She always went. That time and the time before it and the time before that. But she drove to Patricia's the following weekend instead, alone, mostly in silence, turning something over in her mind, the whole way that she wasn't ready to name yet. Patricia's house felt, the moment Barbara walked through the door, like stepping into a version of her own life she'd somehow lost track of. Quiet, unhurried, entirely, unmistakably Patricia's. her books on her shelves, her schedule dictated by no one but herself, her door opening directly onto her own street. There was a particular kind of stillness in that house, the stillness of a life that belonged to exactly one person. And Barbara realized, sitting on Patricia's worn living room sofa, how long it had been since she had felt that stillness anywhere, including in the rooms she supposedly owned. "You look tired, Barb," Patricia said, setting down 2 cups of tea. "Not sleepy tired, tired underneath." Barbara didn't have an answer ready. She simply nodded and let herself, for the first time in months, sit in a silence that didn't require her to be useful to anyone. They talked for hours that evening, the way old friends do when enough time has passed that the conversation has to cover more ground than usual. Patricia didn't lecture her. She didn't say "I told you so," even though she would have been entitled to. She simply asked questions, gentle but pointed, the kind of questions Barbara hadn't let herself ask out loud in months. When was the last time you painted something just because you wanted to? When was the last time you made a plan that didn't have to be cleared with anyone first? When you pictured this arrangement back before you sold the house, is this the life you actually pictured? Barbara didn't have good answers to any of it, and by the time she drove home on Sunday afternoon, something in her had quietly shifted from confusion into resolve. She still loved her son. She still wanted to be close to her grandchildren, but she understood, in a way she hadn't allowed herself to fully admit before, that wanting closeness and accepting an arrangement with no protections in it were 2 very different things, and she had let herself confuse one for the other. The moment that finally broke everything open came on an ordinary Wednesday evening at the kitchen table in the main house, during what Daniel had called, with unintended formality, a little family meeting. "So, Jessica and I have been talking," Daniel began, echoing, without realizing it, the exact words he used the night he first proposed this whole arrangement. "The kids are getting older, and they really don't have a dedicated playroom. We were thinking, your sunroom, over in the suite. It's not like you use it that much these days, right, with everything going on." Barbara felt something go very cold and very still inside her chest. The sunroom was where her easel stood by the window, catching the exact afternoon light she'd once described to the contractor in careful, hopeful detail. She had painted there perhaps a dozen times in the past 8 months, not because she didn't want to, but because there had rarely been an afternoon left over that belonged only to her. "That's my art room," she said quietly. Jessica reached over and touched her hand, the gesture landing somewhere between comfort and dismissal. "We know, and we're so sorry to even bring it up, but it just makes so much more sense for the kids to have a space, and you could always paint at the kitchen table, or we could set something up in the corner of your bedroom." Your bedroom, not your home, not your suite, just the one remaining room they hadn't yet suggested repurposing. Barbara looked at her son, at the mild, apologetic expression on his face. A man who genuinely believed he was being reasonable, who had no real understanding of what he was actually asking, because in his mind it had never stopped being his house, his decision to make. And that was when she finally understood, with a clarity she couldn't push back down, what had actually happened to her over these 8 months. She had sold her home. She had handed over a significant portion of the proceeds toward a building she had no legal claim to. She had no lease, no deed, no agreement, nothing with her name on it anywhere in this arrangement. She had slowly, month by month, given up her hobbies, her friendships, her free afternoons, her ability to make a simple weekend plan without checking first. And now she was being asked to give up the one remaining room where she still technically got to be only herself. She had not been tricked exactly. Nobody in this family was cruel, but she had been absorbed quietly and almost lovingly into a structure where her needs came last. Not because anyone had decided that on purpose, but because nobody had ever needed to consider them at all. She had made it too easy. She had assumed love would be enough of a contract. "I need some time to think about this," Barbara said, and she stood up from the table before anyone could answer and walked back through their yard to her suite, which suddenly felt less like a home and more like a very well-decorated waiting room. She called Patricia that night. "I think I made a mistake," Barbara said. "Not moving here, but how I moved here. I didn't protect myself at all." "So protect yourself now," Patricia said simply. "It's not too late just because you didn't do it first." The next morning, Barbara called an attorney Patricia recommended, one who specialized in elder law and real estate, and described as plainly as she could manage exactly what had happened: the sale of her house, the money contributed toward construction, the total absence of any written agreement, the property entirely in her son's name. The news was not simple, and it was not entirely good. Barbara learned that because nothing had ever been documented, she had no automatic legal right to remain in the suite, no formal claim on the money she'd contributed, nothing that would hold up cleanly if this relationship ever soured completely. But the attorney also told her something she badly needed to hear. It wasn't too late to fix this. There were still paths forward. A formal agreement could still be drafted now, even years into an informal arrangement, something like a life estate, giving her a documented, legally enforceable right to live in the space for as long as she chose. There were ways to formally account for the money she'd already contributed, even after the fact, through a properly drafted agreement between family members. It would require an uncomfortable conversation. It would require Daniel and Jessica agreeing to something they had never imagined needing to put in writing. But it was possible. Barbara returned home 4 days later, not with an ultimatum, but with a plan, and a clarity she hadn't carried in longer than she cared to admit. She asked Daniel to meet her alone without Jessica at a coffee shop near his office. Neutral ground, away from the house, away from the children, away from anything that could be used, even unintentionally, to make her feel like she was causing a scene in front of family. "I love you," she told him, "and I am deeply grateful for this home you built. But I need you to understand something. Right now I have no legal right to live here. None. I gave you a significant amount of money, and I have nothing, no paper, no protection, showing that. I need us to fix that together as adults, not as mother and son having a difficult moment." Daniel, to his credit, didn't argue. He looked more than anything quietly stricken. The particular shame of a person realizing all at once everything he had failed to notice he was doing. "I never meant for it to feel like that, Mom." "I know," Barbara said. "That's actually the whole problem." Over the following weeks, with the attorney's guidance, Barbara and Daniel drew up a formal agreement. It documented in writing the money she had contributed to construction and established a life estate granting her a legal, enforceable right to remain in the suite for as long as she wished, regardless of any future disagreement, any future change in the family's circumstances. They negotiated the installation of an independent gate and walkway at Daniel and Jessica's expense, giving Barbara direct access to the street without cutting through anyone's kitchen. They set clear, specific expectations around childcare. 2 afternoons a week, agreed in advance, with a reasonable notice for anything beyond that, and an understanding that Barbara's Tuesday watercolor class was no longer available for scheduling around. The sunroom stayed exactly as it was. Barbara re-enrolled in her class the following semester and hasn't missed a Tuesday since. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Jessica took the new arrangement personally at first, and there were a few tense weeks where conversations at the main house felt clipped and careful. But slowly something shifted, not into resentment, but into a kind of mutual respect that hadn't quite existed before. The recognition on everyone's part that Barbara's presence in their lives was a gift she was choosing to give freely over and over, rather than a debt she was quietly paying off. Barbara also did one more thing the attorney had gently suggested, almost as an afterthought. She started a modest savings account of her own again, funded by a small portion of what remained from the house sale, money she had set firmly aside and told no one about. Not because she expected to need it, but because she had learned at real cost that having a plan B is not the same thing as not trusting your family. It's simply what it means to remain, in every sense that matters, a fully independent adult. Barbara's story is worth sitting with because it doesn't involve a villain. Nobody in this family set out to take advantage of her. And that is exactly why so many parents find themselves in some version of her position, not through cruelty, but through love, expressed without enough structure underneath it. If you are ever considering moving onto property owned by your children, or contributing significant money toward a home you won't legally own, put everything in writing before you sign anything or transfer a single dollar. A formal agreement between family members is not a lack of trust. It is what allows trust to survive difficult seasons. Never sell your own home to finance someone else's property without consulting your own independent attorney first. Not a friend of the family, not the buyer's agent, someone representing only your interests. Insist on independent access in any shared living arrangement, your own entrance, your own way in and out that doesn't depend on someone else's schedule or goodwill. Set clear, specific boundaries around childcare and any other regular help you provide, in writing if possible, so a kind of gesture doesn't quietly harden into an unpaid, unlimited obligation. Keep at least one financial resource that remains entirely your own. No matter how generous or trustworthy the arrangement seems, independence isn't about doubting the people you love. It's about making sure you never have to depend entirely on anyone's continued goodwill to keep a roof over your head. And perhaps most importantly, remember that family closeness and personal autonomy are not opposites. You can move closer to the people you love without giving up your legal standing, your hobbies, your friendships, or the small, quiet parts of your life that make you who you are. Barbara still lives in that sunroom-facing suite today. She still watches her grandchildren grow up 10 steps from her own door. But now she does it as a woman standing on solid ground, with a document that protects her, a gate that lets her come and go freely, and a Tuesday afternoon that belongs unmistakably to no one but herself. If your children ever asked you to sell your home and move onto their property, what would you want in writing first? Tell us in the comments and let us know what city or country you're watching from tonight. Someone else, considering the exact same decision Barbara once made, might need to read your answer before they sign anything. If this story meant something to you, subscribe to Better with Time for more stories from the Dignity years, because loving your family and protecting yourself were never meant to be a choice between one or the other.